Today's top stories and a roundup of the week's news. Greece votes on whether to accept more austerity in exchange for a bailout, with the referendum casting doubts on the future of the eurozone. The leaders of Brazil and France were the target of US spies. The overt surveillance of the country's top officials was revealed by Wikileaks this week. Plus, Iran and world powers signal they are nearing a nuclear deal after pushing the deadline further back, but they stopped short from sharing the details of the elusive agreement. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Neil Harvey and you're watching The Weekly here on RT International. Greeks are casting their ballots in the high-stakes referendum on bailout conditions. The vote's seen as decisive for the country's future in the eurozone. The Greek Prime Minister has hailed it as a celebration of democracy.
Σήμερα η δημοκρατία κερδίζει το κόβο.
Alexis Tsipras went on to say that the referendum is sending a strong message across the EU and will open a road for all the nations in Europe. He seemed to be in quite a good mood as well while casting his ballot, and there is little doubt about his choice, as he has been calling on the nations to say no to further austerity.
Σας καλώ την Κυριακή να πείτε ξανά ένα μεγάλο και περήφανο όχι στα τελεσίγραφα. Να γυρίσετε την πλάτη σε αυτούς που σας τρομοκρατούν καθημερινά.
An opinion poll carried out by the GPO company, which appeared earlier this week, showed the yes vote edging ahead with 47%. However, the company later said the poll was released without its permission and only reflected partial results. But the situation on the streets of Athens, well, that has clearly shown the nation is divided, with tens of thousands attending rival rallies ahead of the vote. The Greek capital saw scores of rallies throughout the week, and not all of them passed off entirely peacefully. So how did Greece find itself in such a predicament? Well, let's recall some key points on its rocky ride in the eurozone. It joined the euro back in January 2001. After the global financial crisis of 2008, its national debt went through the roof. The first bailout for Greece was approved in 2010 in exchange for severe cuts. 2 years later, a new bailout was needed to keep the Greek economy afloat, and to meet the demands of international creditors, Athens imposed further austerity measures. In January of this year, the left-wing Syriza party came to power with promises to put an end to severe cuts. But after months of negotiations, there is still no debt deal in sight, and Greece has found itself in an unprecedented situation. It has become the first ever advanced economy to fall into arrears with the International Monetary Fund. It pushes Athens closer to a default on its entire €320 billion debt burden, which would be the biggest sovereign default in history. By missing the deadline, the EU member joins nations such as Zimbabwe, Sudan and Somalia, which are all behind on their payments to the IMF. Now, since 2010, Greece has received a whopping €240 billion in bailout funds, but less than 10% of that has been spent on economic and social reforms. Most of it has gone to the financiers who lent money to Athens before the crisis. Even IMF officials admit that the bailout's aim was to save the French and German banks who'd been funding Greece. The international creditors are nevertheless pressuring the country to take sole responsibility for the state it's in now.
This government has done nothing since it came into office. It's reneged on previously agreed commitments. You can't, in all honesty, expect us to talk with them in a situation like this.
Given the political situation, the rejection of the previous proposals and the no advice of the Greek government, we see no ground for further talks at this point.
I'm blaming the Greeks to tell things to the Greek public which are not consistent with what I told the Greek Prime Minister.
What they're essentially saying is that your own government is the enemy and we're your friends. Just don't buy anymore.
They're trying to polarize the Greek society, and this is going to create a lot of problems.
When you are negotiate with the Europeans and when you say one thing in the meeting room, and then you go outside and blame them and accuse them, doesn't show a very reliable Greek and very stable Greek government.
Now, among all of the European leaders, there is one who is perhaps a little more preoccupied with the Greek drama than the others.
Ich begrüße. Ja. Ja, damit die Sache dann wieder ausgeglichen ist, sagen wir mal ne. Das heißt nämlich ja auf Griechisch.
The Chancellor is also facing internal political pressure over Greece. The opposition Left Party lashed out at the government, saying that it simply wants to topple Cyprus.
The austerity backed by Germany and the Troika has failed. Soup kitchens and more soup kitchens. Greece is not the only one to have broken the EU's budget rules. Why is it being vilified? You want to remove the leftist government in Greece. That's what it is about.
And there are plenty of reasons why Germany will be keeping a close eye on today's referendum in Greece. A potential Grexit, well, that would be regarded a political disaster for Merkel, who's been in charge while the crisis has evolved. We spoke with global financial markets expert Patrick Young. He spelt out how much the Greek crisis is costing Merkel.
A large number of Mrs Merkel's own backbenchers don't want to see another penny going to Greece. Also, you've got parties such as the AVD, the Alternative for Germany, whether they are of the hue of the National Front in France, whether they're something like the Five Star League of Beppe Grillo in Italy, whether you're looking at something like UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party in Britain. Very different politics, but one and all, they're united on one thing. They don't want to see endless amounts of money being allocated to the Euro blob to be wasted. Just as Mrs Merkel is the most sensationally overblown up, overemphasised, over-talked about politician of her times, she's a political pygmy leading a union of pygmies. Their economy is going down the drain. The European Union, as it currently stands, is working its way into economic irrelevance. And Mrs Merkel is delusional if she believes that she is actually in any way involved in leading an economic powerhouse.
The Greek leadership has been insisting that it has no intention to leave the eurozone. However, if Athens says no to the EU's bailout terms, well, many believe it eventually will. Whether Greece heads for the exit or remains within the bloc with part of its debt written off, there are fears it could trigger a domino effect. Countries like Spain and Italy, they were also hit hard by austerity measures imposed by international creditors. There are many in those countries who support the Greek case. For example, Spanish MEPs have spoken in solidarity with Athens.
Que apoyamos totalmente el referéndum y que, como no puede ser de otra forma, apoyaremos las decisiones que adopte el gobierno de Syriza.
Todo mi apoyo al pueblo griego, a los griegos y a las griegas, porque estáis dando una lección de democracia ante todos los ataques y todas las amenazas que vienen de los poderes económicos y de los poderes privados.
Que dejen de mentir, que dejen de engañar. El debate ahora no es euro sí o euro no. El debate es democracia o dictadura de los poderes financieros.
Rallies in support of Greece's anti-austerity drive swept across Europe. In Brussels, around 5,000 hit the streets in solidarity with its leaders, who are refusing to give in to the demands of creditors. In the French capital, crowds of supporters called for Athens' debt to be written off. Similar protests were held in Berlin, Rome and other European cities. The most recent rally gathered hundreds in the capital of Portugal, which, like Greece, has been bearing the brunt of tough austerity.